The woman's hair seemed to come alive, worming its way desperately down her boyfriend's throat, impossible to separate no matter how hard they pulled. Immediately after, all their skin tissue fused tightly together, gradually becoming a single monolithic entity. When the hearts of a loving couple drift apart, yet their bodies are forced closer than ever, is this a curse or a blessing? Welcome to the most bizarre horror film of 2025. Enough talk, let's dive right in. The film begins with a hiker searching all over the mountains for his two pet dogs, unaware that the thirsty dogs had found a hidden pond and were happily drinking from it. Before long, the owner finally locates the dogs, but for some reason, they seem dazed and unresponsive to his whistle. The man reluctantly takes them back to his place. Late at night, strange noises erupt from the kennel, prompting the man to rush over and investigate. He shines his flashlight into the dark kennel, only to discover the two dogs have fused into one inseparable mass. The scene shifts to our protagonists, Tim and Millie, who have been in a relationship for years, but their feelings are hanging by a thread. Millie has been trying hard to save everything. She convinced Tim to move to a new place, hoping a fresh start could help rebuild their bond. She even proposes to Tim during their farewell party in front of all their friends and family. But Tim freezes up, causing the atmosphere to turn increasingly awkward. Tim finally snaps out of it and quickly says yes. But some things, once the perfect moment is missed, feel far less genuine. That night, feeling guilty, Tim apologizes to Millie again, only for Millie to immediately suggest breaking up. Deep down, she is also confused and insecure, full of doubt about whether they still love each other. Tim frantically apologizes, pouring out declarations of love, and Millie reluctantly withdraws the breakup suggestion for now. Tim falls asleep, troubled, plagued by nightmares until he jolts awake. Hoping to mend their fraying bond, they soon leave friends and work behind, moving to an unfamiliar countryside for some alone time. While unpacking, Tim catches a foul odor and traces the stench to the ceiling. He removes a ceiling light, reaching into the palm-sized hole to pull out several dead rats, explaining the pungent smell. They didn't take the incident too seriously. After all, it was a new place, and there were many things to adjust to. Millie is a highly accomplished woman with an impressive resume, quickly landing a new job at the local school. Tim, a music producer reliant on inspiration, needs to return to the city for a concert on Thursday. Lacking a driver's license, he asks Millie to drive him to the station. Before leaving, Tim wanted to accompany Millie on a hike to a spot they had previously picked out, but not long after they set off, the path was blocked. Tim was unwilling to waste the trip, wanting to take another unfamiliar trail, only to see copper bells hanging all along the way, like markers left by someone else. They figured the markings meant they wouldn't get lost, so they ventured in but quickly lost their way. To make matters worse, it suddenly started pouring, and they lost phone signal. Suddenly, Tim steps into nothingness, plunging into a hidden pit. Millie rushes to grab him, causing them both to fall. Tim's phone is lost in the fall, containing his song demos. Millie is exasperated he cares more about the phone than if she's hurt. Tim quickly apologizes. They discovered the pit was quite spacious, and their voices echoed when they spoke loudly, so they decided to move deeper in to take shelter from the rain. This place is the very water hole where the two dogs drank. Millie stared at the pond in the distance, feeling thirsty, but thankfully they still had bottled water with them. Tim gave all the bottled water to Millie and planned to drink from the pond to quench his thirst. After all, in wilderness survival shows, everyone drinks from natural sources, so he figured it probably wouldn't be a big deal. With the rain showing no sign of stopping, they light a fire for warmth and chat. Millie can't help but ask Tim, "How did you find those dead rats?" Tim explains that as a child, his father one day claimed to smell something foul, tearing the house apart, searching for the source, even ripping up floorboards. Young Tim was terrified because he smelled nothing and couldn't understand his father's rage. Returning from school the next day, he found his father standing in his bedroom, grinning eerily. His father had finally found the source, a mouse nesting above Tim's heat lamp. Turning on his bedside lamp had slowly roasted the mouse in the ceiling. Though the dead mouse was removed, Tim couldn't let it go, unable to believe he'd been breathing in its decomposing stench nightly without noticing. Years later, that same rotting smell returned. Tim discovered his father's corpse in the bedroom, his mentally disturbed mother sitting beside it, staring back at Tim with a terrifying smile. Just as Tim hadn't smelled the dead mouse, his mother seemed oblivious to her husband's death, still sleeping beside the corpse nightly. This was the first time Tim had shared this dark history with Millie. That grotesque smile and thick stench of death had become his deepest, most terrifying nightmare. That night, sleeping in the stone pit, Tim is jolted awake by strange sounds and a suffocating sensation, as if something pulsed with his breath, like the whole cave had come alive. Millie, lying beside him, begins to sob. The next instant, Tim wakes from the dream. The damp environment is deeply uncomfortable, but the rain has stopped, and they decide to leave. But their calves were stuck together. Tim thought it might be some kind of mold and gritted his teeth to tear apart the sticky skin. They climb out using vines, finally finding their way home. After showering, Millie feels sore all over and asks Tim to massage her shoulders. Gazing at his lover's bare back, Tim feels dizzy. He fights the discomfort to knead her muscles, but the dizziness intensifies.
Tim!
What?
Seeing Tim's pallor, Millie tells him to shower and rest while she goes into town for groceries. Millie drove along the winding mountain road. While back home, Tim seemed remotely controlled, lurching violently, in sync with the car's movements. She floored the accelerator, and Tim nearly smashed the bathroom tiles, snapping back to awareness. Feeling increasingly disturbed, he decided to see a psychologist. After all, his mother had mental illness, and Tim worried about genetic predisposition. Dr. Mendoza preliminarily diagnosed Tim with anxiety disorder, warning that without proper management, it could develop into somatic panic disorder, potentially slowing central nervous system activity. Dr. Mendoza prescribed Tim medication and mentioned the mysterious disappearance of a couple from the town he'd just moved to. Tim searched for related news at home, finding police had conducted large-scale searches but never located the couple's bodies. Tim looked up the woman Carrie's social media account, seeing many couple photos she'd posted. Just then, Millie came in, suggesting he skip tomorrow's concert, if unwell. She noticed the information on his computer mid-sentence. Millie hadn't known about the local disappearances either. A knock sounded at the door. It was Millie's colleague and neighbor, Jamie. They warmly invited him in, sharing yesterday's cave misadventure. Tim asked Jamie about the purpose of the copper bells and why they were in the woods. Jamie explained there used to be a small church there, collapsed years prior, run not by traditional clergy but by New Age hippies who looked like pagans.
What happened to them?
Mass suicide. No.
Oh, God.
Jamie made a light joke, then added he didn't know where that group went, surmising they left after the church was destroyed. Tim sensed Jamie's obvious interest in Millie, feeling jealous. After Jamie left, he immediately sought physical closeness with Millie, but suddenly, their lips stuck together, and pulling apart caused a sharp pain. Millie thought Tim had bitten her on purpose and angrily went back to her room. Late at night, she felt a sharp tug on her scalp, initially thinking Tim lay on her hair, only to turn and see him wide-eyed. The hair seemed to come alive, desperately forcing its way down Tim's throat. They struggled for a while to yank all the hair off before finally escaping the nightmare. The next day, Tim avoided discussing the incident, hypersensitive due to his mother's history, terrified Millie would see him as mentally ill. Resigned, Millie drove Tim to the station, suggesting he stay in the city overnight with band friends to forget recent troubles. Yet, as distance grew, Tim struggled to breathe again, immediately taking the prescribed pills. When the train arrived at the station, Tim couldn't care less about the concert anymore. He didn't even grab his guitar and ran straight back, his face growing paler by the second. Meanwhile, Millie finished her first class, noticing a girl named Anna drawing something deeply unsettling. 2 dogs with conjoined heads. Then a friend called, sensing Millie's unhappiness with country life and feeling burdened by Tim, urging her to reconsider the relationship. Before Millie could respond, she saw Tim standing downstairs with a sickly pale face. She rushed to pull Tim into the bathroom and asked him what had happened. Instead, he desperately sought physical intimacy. The awkwardness lay in their inexplicable fusion, risking discovery by outsiders at any moment. Millie clamped a hand over Tim's mouth, wrenching them apart painfully. Someone outside, hearing noises, asked if Millie was okay. Millie struggled to steady her breathing, flushed the toilet, and pretended everything was normal as she walked out. Jamie was standing nearby with a little boy who had apparently found the men's bathroom occupied and went to get a teacher.
You might want to clean up.
Jamie glanced back as he left, spotting a man inside the stall. When Millie got home, she exploded with anger. What Tim had done today might not only get her fired, but could even lead to arrest if things got worse. She was tired of cleaning up his messes and financing his unrealistic music dreams. Millie went to apologize to Jamie, hoping he wouldn't report it. Jamie invited her inside. Bottled up frustration spilled out as Millie confided in Jamie about constant fights since the move. Jamie, a history teacher, shared Plato. Ancient Greeks believed humans originally had 4 hands, 4 legs, and 1 head with 2 faces. But Zeus split them in half, fearing their power. Thus, everyone spends life seeking their other half. If you think you found yours, don't let go easily. Jamie once had someone he loved dearly too, but he didn't treasure that relationship. He kept trying to shake the other person off, chasing his own idea of freedom. As he spoke, he adjusted the 2 wedding rings on his hand. Jamie wanted to show Millie his wedding video. She spotted Tim lurking outside and hastily excused herself. But Jamie's words had calmed Millie, and she took Tim's hand and walked home with him. At midnight, Tim couldn't sleep. He logged back into Carrie's old account and searched for the location where her hiking photo was taken. He discovered the coordinates matched the woods where he had once gotten lost. Zooming in, he spotted the distinctively marked bell behind them in the picture. Suddenly, the computer lost its internet connection, and a loud bang came from behind, startling Tim so much that he collapsed onto the floor. Through the frosted glass, he saw a face pressed tightly against the door, rubbing up and down. Tim thought the person outside might be Millie and cautiously approached the door. But a powerful suction force pulled him forward and slammed him against the glass. The moment he pushed it open, Millie fused to him immediately.
Baby, wake up! Oh, baby!
Given the recent bizarre events, they had to sit down and talk properly. Tim couldn't help but bring up that the missing couple had also been on the path leading to the cave. He suspected the recent strange events might be connected to that cave. Every night when their minds relaxed, their bodies took over, uncontrollably drawn toward each other. Millie thought Tim was being overly dramatic and didn't believe something so supernatural could exist. She didn't want to argue and turned to go to bed, but the moment she reached the doorway, a nosebleed started to flow. At that point, even if Millie didn't want to admit it, she realized things were getting out of hand. Still, she stubbornly sent Tim to sleep in the guest room. But by midnight, Tim found himself uncontrollably sliding towards the master bedroom. He desperately braced against the wall to stop his movement. The next second, Millie opened the door and crawled out in an inhuman posture, her body twisting like clay. Despite their frantic struggles, their bodies eagerly fused together, their palms melding into one within moments. Tim shouted that there were muscle relaxants in the drawer. Millie frantically yanked it open and bit the lid off the bottle. They grabbed the pills from the floor and shoved them into their mouths. The large dose of relaxant took effect, paralyzing their systems. Tim and Millie braced their feet against each other and tore their fused arms apart with all their might. Just when they were about to separate completely, they passed out from the overwhelming drug effect. The next day, Tim woke from his stupor to find himself tied to a chair by Millie, with a power drill beside him. And part of their arm skin was still connected. Millie poured whiskey into Tim's mouth to numb the pain and explained that the drugs hadn't fully worn off yet. If they didn't act now, separating later would be even harder. Millie proved to be ruthless. She grabbed the power drill and cut into their fused area. After excruciating pain, they finally separated. However, with little muscle relaxant left, Millie decided to go to the hospital for a checkup, but her car keys were at Jamie's house. Millie immediately went to Jamie's for the keys, while Tim hastily gathered his hiking gear and returned to the strange cave. Millie rang the doorbell and let herself in. Had she looked closely, she would have noticed a sun-shaped mark on the doorbell, identical to the one in the cave. The house was empty, with no sign of Jamie. A video played on the TV at the far end, showing a small bell hanging at the entrance of a church. At the same time, Tim had reached the bottom of the cave and noticed that the stone walls still held remnants of a chapel mural, depicting a human with 4 arms, 4 legs, and 1 head, with faces on both sides. And Millie saw this very painting in the video. In the video, Jamie was exchanging rings with his lover. They opened a hidden passage and, surrounded by cult members, entered the underground cavern. The group gathered around a pool of water where the couple pledged their vows before the spring, wishing to become each other's other half. The next instant, Jamie turned off the video and appeared with the car keys. He congratulated Millie on receiving the god's blessing, allowing her to share fear. memories, and even a body with her beloved. Jamie then grabbed Millie's arm, cutting her with his ring. Millie cried out in pain and shoved him away, fleeing. Meanwhile, Tim was pulled down by a hand. A four-limbed monster crawled from the shadows. The creature's bright red hair suggested it was the missing couple, Carrie and her partner. They likely merged after drinking the spring water and never escaped this hellhole. As the two-headed monster slowly approached, Tim was terrified out of his wits. He spotted a dagger lodged in its neck and yanked it out to use as a weapon. He hacked off the monster's hand, breaking free. Tim then grabbed the climbing rope and hauled himself out of the cave. He lay on the ground, recovering for a long time before heading home. But just as he reached his doorstep, he ran into Millie. Before they could share what had happened, they were once again pulled toward each other. Knowing they absolutely couldn't fuse again, they clung desperately to nearby obstacles. But this couldn't last. Tim finally let go, feeling the dagger hidden behind his back. Perhaps only one solution remained. He walked up to Millie, knelt on one knee, and apologized for his long-standing neglect. Tim had spent so long chasing his dream, he'd forgotten to cherish what he had. Looking back now, he realized Millie was far more precious than his dreams. With that, Tim prepared to end his own life. But then a trail of blood crept over his body. Tim followed it to Millie's injured arm. She had collapsed from blood loss. Facing Millie's critical condition, Tim had no choice. He let their arms fuse, quickly stemming her bleeding. After everything they'd endured, they understood they couldn't live without each other. So, there was nothing left to fear. Tim played their favorite record. Holding on to their fused hands, they danced gracefully, willingly, becoming one inseparable whole. On Sunday, Millie's parents came to visit.
Hey.
The film ends here. Surprisingly, it's actually a pure love story. Judging from the final shot, Tim and Millie had likely fully merged, becoming one complete person, just as Plato described. It seems Jamie must have fused with his partner too. As for Carrie, something must have gone wrong for that couple to become four-limbed monsters, perhaps because they didn't love each other enough. This film magnifies the anxieties within intimate relationships, crafting an innovative body horror. The concept is genuinely good, making for a uniquely crafted horror movie.